I'm sick of looking at you." The words landed with the casual cruelty of a man who didn't believe they mattered. Duke Nathaniel Sterling barely looked up from the documents spread across his desk. He was irritated, tired, frustrated by a trade negotiation that had consumed 3 straight weeks. Unfortunately, his wife happened to be standing closest when his patience finally snapped. Across the study, Duchess Evelyn Sterling stood motionless. She had entered carrying tea, nothing more. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. Nathaniel expected tears, an argument, at least visible hurt. Instead, Evelyn calmly placed the tray upon a side table. Then she smiled, a small smile, strangely peaceful. "If you're tired of seeing my face," she said softly, "then look elsewhere." Nathaniel sighed. "Evelyn, don't start." "I'm not starting anything," she answered, then quietly left the room. The door closed behind her. Nathaniel immediately returned to his paperwork. He never realized those would be the last words his wife ever spoke to him. 5 years earlier, their marriage had seemed impossible, not because they disliked one another, because they belonged to completely different worlds. Nathaniel had been born into power, raised among ministers, educated by diplomats, prepared from childhood to inherit one of the largest duchies in the kingdom. Evelyn Fairchild had grown up in a remote coastal town. Her father built ships. Her mother taught village children. She possessed no grand title, no political influence, no royal connections, only intelligence, kindness, and a remarkable ability to make people feel important. Nathaniel fell in love first. At least, he thought he did. He loved how different she felt from court society. She laughed freely, spoke honestly, never treated conversations like negotiations. When he proposed, everyone was shocked. His family especially. The Dowager Duchess protested immediately. A fisherman's daughter? Nathaniel stood firm. "I love her." Eventually, the marriage happened, and for a while, everything seemed wonderful. The first year felt effortless. Nathaniel found excuses to leave meetings early. Evelyn filled the manor with warmth. Music returned to empty halls. Fresh flowers appeared everywhere. Servants smiled more. Even visiting nobles admitted the castle felt alive. Then responsibility arrived. A border dispute, a failed harvest, political unrest, trade conflicts. Each crisis demanded more time, more attention, more sacrifice. Nathaniel gradually disappeared into work. Not intentionally, simply one day at a time. Evelyn adapted. At first, she waited for him after dinner, then after midnight, then stopped waiting altogether. Instead, she found her own purpose. The Sterling Duchy contained dozens of isolated coastal villages. Many lacked doctors, libraries, reliable schools. Some communities remained nearly cut off during winter storms. Evelyn remembered her own childhood. She decided to change that, using her inheritance and later her ducal allowance. She created traveling schools, mobile medical clinics, floating libraries delivered by boat, scholarship programs, teacher exchanges, emergency relief networks. The projects spread throughout the coastline. Within 4 years, the Sterling Coastal Initiative became one of the kingdom's most successful humanitarian programs. Children received education. Families gained medical care. Entire communities transformed. Nathaniel heard about the success often, usually during official meetings. The Duchess's coastal programs continue producing remarkable results. He always nodded proudly. "My wife enjoys charitable work." No one corrected him, at least not directly. One afternoon, the king's advisor visited Sterling Manor. He congratulated Nathaniel warmly. "Your wife may have accomplished more for the coast than any governor in 50 years. Nathaniel smiled politely. "She's always been generous." The advisor blinked. "Generous." Another pause. "No. Brilliant." Nathaniel barely noticed the distinction. Meanwhile, Evelyn quietly continued building. Not because anyone praised her, because people needed help. The 4th year brought subtle changes. Tiny things, almost invisible. She stopped asking Nathaniel to accompany her to events, stopped setting aside his favorite desserts, stopped bringing books into his study, hoping to share passages, stopped waiting by the window for his carriage, stopped expecting. The servants noticed. Nathaniel didn't. One evening, Mrs. Mercer, the elderly housekeeper, gently approached Evelyn. "Doesn't it hurt?" Evelyn smiled sadly. "What?" "Feeling invisible." A long silence followed. Finally, she answered honestly. "Only when I remember I wasn't always." That sentence haunted Mrs. Mercer for months. The following spring, Queen Adelaide visited one of Evelyn's coastal academies. Children greeted her with songs, paintings, hymn-made gifts. The Queen spent hours touring classrooms. Before leaving, she privately asked Evelyn, "Does your husband understand what you've built?" Evelyn considered the question, then answered carefully, "He knows it exists." The Queen frowned. "That's not what I asked." Evelyn simply smiled. Back at Sterling Manor, life continued, or appeared to. Nathaniel increasingly believed his marriage was stable. After all, they rarely argued, rarely disagreed, rarely created problems. To him, peace meant happiness. He never realized silence sometimes meant surrender. Then came the autumn summit, the largest political gathering of the year. Nobles, ministers, foreign ambassadors, military leaders, everyone attended. Evelyn spent most of the evening surrounded by educators, physicians, and civic planners. People genuinely wanted her opinion. They listened when she spoke, asked questions, valued her ideas. Nathaniel noticed, and unexpectedly felt irritated. Not because she had done anything wrong, because he suddenly realized how many people admired her. One minister laughed. "Your wife may be more popular than half the royal cabinet." Nathaniel forced a smile. "She's good with people." Another guest replied, "Good. She's transforming the kingdom." The conversation bothered him more than it should have. Later that evening, while reviewing reports inside his study, the irritation remained. Work piled higher. Exhaustion deepened. Then Evelyn entered carrying tea, and his frustration exploded. "I'm sick of looking at you." The sentence lasted only seconds. Its consequences lasted much longer. The next morning, Nathaniel expected breakfast as usual. Evelyn never arrived. He assumed she had left early for another academy inspection. Lunch passed. Nothing. Dinner arrived. Still nothing. By midnight, he finally asked, "Where is the Duchess?" The butler hesitated, then quietly answered, "Her Grace departed this morning." Nathaniel frowned. "For how long?" The butler lowered his eyes. "Indefinitely." For the first time, Nathaniel looked up. "What do you mean?" No one answered immediately. The silence felt wrong. Heavy. Unfamiliar. Finally, Mrs. Mercer stepped forward. She left before sunrise. "She asked us not to wake you." Nathaniel stood. "Left for where?" Mrs. Mercer handed him a sealed envelope. His name appeared across the front in Evelyn's elegant handwriting. Suddenly, for reasons he couldn't explain, the room felt colder. Nathaniel broke the seal. Inside rested only a single sheet of paper. Nothing dramatic. No accusations. No anger. Only one paragraph. "For years, I believed love meant waiting. Then I realized waiting was the only thing I had left. You said you were tired of seeing my face. I finally understood something important. A person should never stay where their presence feels like a burden. Take care of yourself, Nathaniel. You no longer need to look elsewhere." He read it twice, then 3 times. His hands began trembling. "Find her," he whispered. But Mrs. Mercer simply looked at him with tears in her eyes. Because everyone in the room already knew something the Duke had not yet understood. Evelyn hadn't left in anger. She hadn't left hoping to be chased. She hadn't left to teach him a lesson. She had left because she was finally done waiting. And people who reach that point rarely come back. People who reach that point rarely come back. Nathaniel spent the next several days refusing to believe it. Not because he was arrogant, because accepting it meant admitting something far worse. That his wife hadn't left impulsively. She had left after years of careful consideration. The first week felt unreal. He expected a letter, a message, a request, something, anything. Nothing arrived. The second week, the manner began changing. Not physically, emotionally. Nathaniel noticed the silence first. The enormous castle had always been quiet. Yet somehow, it had never felt empty. Now it did. The music room remained untouched. No piano melodies drifted through the hallways. No laughter echoed from distant gardens. No conversations lingered after dinner. One evening, Nathaniel entered the library. A vase stood empty beside the fireplace. He stared at it for several moments, then suddenly remembered. Evelyn had replaced those flowers every Monday morning for 5 years. The moment she stopped, no one else thought to continue. The realization disturbed him more than it should have. Mrs. Mercer eventually found him standing there. "Your Grace." Nathaniel looked toward the empty vase. How many things did she do around here? The old housekeeper smiled sadly. Too many for one person to notice. That answer followed him for days. 3 weeks after Evelyn's departure, a thick folder arrived from the Ministry of Coastal Affairs. Nathaniel expected routine reports. Instead, he discovered something startling. Every major coastal improvement during the last 5 years carried Evelyn's signature. New schools, harbor expansions, emergency shelters, medical stations, scholarship programs, teacher recruitment networks, storm warning systems, page after page, project after project, success after success. Nathaniel sat motionless. For years, he had assumed committees handled everything. Advisors, administrators, officials. Instead, most of the vision belonged to Evelyn. A handwritten note attached to one report caught his attention. The king's advisor had written, "The Duchess continues solving problems before government departments even identify them." Nathaniel slowly lowered the document. He couldn't remember ever asking Evelyn about her work. Not once. The next morning, he canceled every meeting, every dinner, every political engagement. His chief advisor nearly panicked. "The Duke cannot disappear." Nathaniel looked directly at him. "My wife disappeared." No one seemed concerned. Without another word, he left, for the first time in years. Nathaniel traveled through the duchy. Not for politics, not for inspections, for answers. His first destination was a coastal village called Whitehaven, one of Evelyn's earliest projects. The mayor immediately recognized him. "Your Grace." Nathaniel nodded. "I wanted to ask about the Duchess." The mayor smiled warmly. "Everyone does." They spent hours walking through the village. A modern school overlooked the harbor. A medical clinic served 3 neighboring communities. A library boat prepared to leave for isolated islands. Everywhere Nathaniel looked, Evelyn's ideas remained visible. At one point, a young girl approached carrying several books. "Are you Lady Evelyn's husband?" Nathaniel hesitated. "Yes." The girl smiled. "She said you worked very hard." His throat tightened. Even after everything, Evelyn had never spoken badly about him. Another village. Another story. "She paid for my son's education." Another. "She stayed 3 days during the winter storm." Another. "She remembered every family by name." Everywhere, people loved Evelyn. Not because she was Duchess, because she cared. One elderly fisherman finally said something Nathaniel would never forget. "You know?" The old man stared toward the ocean. "She used to sit right there." He pointed toward a weathered wooden bench overlooking the harbor. Whenever she visited, Nathaniel looked confused. Doing what? Waiting. The answer hit harder than any accusation. Waiting for what? The fisherman smiled sadly. "For you." Nathaniel couldn't speak. "She always believed one day you'd come with her." The old man stood, adjusting his coat. Eventually she stopped waiting. Then he walked away, leaving Nathaniel alone beside the sea. That night, for the first time, Nathaniel cried. Not because she left, because he finally understood why. Months passed. Still no word. Then one morning, a royal invitation arrived. Queen Adelaide requested his presence. Nathaniel traveled immediately. The Queen received him privately. No ministers, no guards, no ceremony, only tea. After several minutes of silence, she finally spoke. "You've changed." Nathaniel smiled weakly. "I had no choice." The Queen studied him carefully. "Do you know where she is?" He looked up immediately. "You do?" The Queen nodded. "Yes." Hope surged through him. For the first time in months. "Please." The Queen sighed softly. "You may see her." Relief flooded his face. Until she added, "But you must understand something first." Nathaniel waited. The Queen folded her hands. "If you go expecting to bring her home, don't go." Silence. "Why?" The Queen answered gently. "Because she already found one." Several days later, Nathaniel arrived at the Royal Coastal Institute, a massive educational and research center overlooking the sea. Students crossed beautiful stone courtyards. Teachers filled outdoor classrooms. Doctors trained medical apprentices. Ships departed carrying books and supplies. Life existed everywhere. Then, he saw her. Evelyn stood near the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The wind played gently through her chestnut hair. She wore a simple blue dress. No ducal jewels. No symbols of rank. And somehow, she looked happier than he had ever seen her. Not because she escaped him, because she had finally stopped shrinking herself. She noticed him immediately. Nathaniel. Evelyn. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It simply contained too much truth. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry." She smiled softly. I know. I was cruel. Yes. I took you for granted. Yes. Each answer landed without anger. Without revenge. Only honesty. Nathaniel lowered his eyes. I thought you'd always stay. Evelyn looked toward the ocean. I know. Another pause. Do you remember the day we met? He asked. She laughed quietly. You spilled coffee on my dress. It was tea. It was definitely coffee. For the first time, both smiled. The moment felt familiar and heartbreakingly distant. Finally, Nathaniel asked the question haunting him for months. Did you ever stop loving me? Evelyn considered carefully, then answered, No. Hope immediately flashed across his face, until she continued. But love isn't the same thing as staying. Silence. I loved you. I simply stopped loving the version of myself that disappeared trying to earn your attention. Nathaniel closed his eyes. Because there was nothing to argue against. Nothing. The truth stood between them. Complete. Undeniable. Months later, Nathaniel remained involved with the Institute. Not because Evelyn requested it. Because he genuinely believed in the work. He listened more. Spoke less. Learned names. Remembered stories. Became someone different. Not overnight. Slowly. The way real change happens. One evening, they stood together overlooking the sea as the sun disappeared beneath the horizon. Children laughed somewhere behind them. Ships drifted across golden water. Nathaniel finally said, You told me to look elsewhere. Evelyn smiled. I did. He nodded. So I did. She raised an eyebrow. And Nathaniel looked toward the ocean. Then toward the schools. The clinics. The libraries. The communities she built. Finally, toward her. I spent years looking everywhere except the one place that mattered. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. Not because the pain disappeared. Not because the past changed. But because at last, he truly saw her. And sometimes, the greatest tragedy isn't losing someone. It's realizing they spent years standing directly in front of you, waiting to be seen. Nathaniel almost learned that lesson too late. Almost.